Hi, my name is Kei Morimoto, and I'm the producer of Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster. I'm Ryosuke Murai, and I'm the director of Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster.
The game has come out at this point. I loved the game back in 2006. I played the heck out of it, and one of the things I noticed right out of the gate, it was the way I remembered. It was the way I played it. It was the way that I remember advancing through it with all of the goods and the bads. What was it like taking this thing and kind of keeping what was so good about it intact while kind of polishing it up as you went?
We also took the original game as a basis for making the Deluxe Remaster, and I think I felt that it held up really well when I tried the original Dead Rising as part of the early research phase for this project. But I had to put myself in the shoes of a new player, really. Imagine if I'm in 2024 and I'm picking up this game exactly as it was made excuse me, in 2006. What would be my frustrations, or what would I feel was missing from the game from a modern game player's standpoint? That was really my sort of guiding principle for deciding what are we going to keep exactly as it is as much as possible, what are we going to try and improve in terms of like quality of life adjustments and rebalancing. So as an example, you want to keep the survivors alive if possible during the missions with them. And I don't want to make it so that it's impossible for them to die, because part of the challenge is that you might get the frustrating feeling where you let some of them die, but then you'll get that real sense of satisfaction the second time around when you manage to make it work. But if it's just that you're frustrated because it was too difficult for you to be high enough level to actually manage their mission successfully, then that's just frustrating rather than feeling like a meaty challenge. So we did things like sort of slightly smooth out the leveling curve in the early hours of the game to make sure that if players were, failing the missions or finding the game tough, it was sort of in a good way of finding it challenging rather than just getting turned off and putting the controller down and not continuing the game because they found it too frustrating. And that was kind of the process we went through with every aspect of the game when deciding what we would change in the remaster. But I think hopefully that was a successful process because, as you said, you greatly enjoyed the Deluxe Remaster, so I'm glad to hear that. I think we managed to pull that off.
It was something where it felt the muscle memory came back, the pathing, the my favorite weapons, where to find them. It was so cool to see all that stuff intact. But I also really appreciated the quality of the life improvements. Everybody remembers the times where they were getting calls from Otis, and you get knocked and it ends the call and you got to take that call again from the beginning and you can't skip through it. And not only being able to continue that call but also skip through certain parts of it, it was just like, thank you so much for this. And I'm just kind of curious, where do you kind of decide what is a pain point that you can address versus something that is kind of part of that original charm?
It's essentially the way we would separate out what should remain and what should be updated is it, as you called it, a pain point where you can't actually solve it through your own actions? There's no gameplay action you can take to sort of get around that or to get through it or complete it. In that case, it's just something we need to make, improve the usability of it, so it's not getting in the way of the other gameplay. Whereas if it's just a challenging part of the game and you might get frustrated by, say, dying and having to restart it, if we think that's part of the concept of the game, then we would try and leave it alone and include it as it is. But fortunately, we weren't having to make these decisions in a vacuum because actually several of the original game's staff were working with us on this Deluxe Remaster. So Mr. Kawano, the original game's director, and Mr. Takamatsu, the art director, were working on it with us. So anytime we weren't sure if something was like, is this a sacred cow we can't touch versus is this something that the original staff would be happy to have us go further than they could back in the day and improve it, we were able to sit down with those guys and really have sort of bash it out with them and make decisions about what it was going to be kept the same and what was going to be changed.
I think one of the things I was most surprised to see when I played the game was that all of the original licensed music came back. How fun was it for me to walk into the park, meet the convicts, and then Gone Guru kicks in, like that original iconic riff. Furthermore, just seeing that you guys had the forethought to put in a streamer mode where you can take that sound, you can replace that music with sort of the more original soundtrack to kind of avoid any issues if you're playing the game on a stream. And how early did you identify those challenges and make those decisions to kind of make those points smoother for everyone to play?
It was really important in terms of bringing back the original game experience, not to have to do music replacements that would sort of spoil the experience of certain famous scenes and players like yourselves' memories of what song you expect to play. So from quite an early period, I worked with the licensing team who work on the kind of the rights agreements with music rights holders to make sure that we could get every song back and replicate that full audio experience. And that wasn't without its difficulties, to be sure, but I think it was really worthwhile getting that process started early and making sure it was covered thoroughly. As for the streamer mode, that came along later on development, sort of in the middle period. The sound team actually are the ones who suggested it to us because they were aware of the difficulties that happens when you're doing a live stream of a game and it gets blocked or you have to mute it fully for the segments that had music in it and then you can't really hear the sound effects or things like that. It would have been a real shame because it's a great game for streaming, which isn't something that was really a thing at the time the game came out originally. But in retrospect now, it's kind of the perfect stream game to watch because it's so funny and witty and sort of unusual and unique that watching someone else play is a really fun experience in and of itself. And having a really good influencer or streamer being able to react along with the moments of comically extreme gore or the different actions that the zombies take and the characters take is something that we want to make sure the streamers had a way to prevent their streaming from being interrupted or sort of sullied by some sort of rights problem. So the sound team who came up with the idea worked on the code to make sure that the game was replacing any licensed tracks with in-game music owned by Capcom, and that was something that we want to make sure happened so that you guys could enjoy watching streamers scream along with all the action.
The centerpiece of Dead Rising as a whole, the Willamette Mall is just gorgeous, and can you just like kind of speak to the design process of kind of taking what was there, what these stores, these stalls, these locations all around it, and kind of taking the original and brushing them up and putting kind of a new visual flair on all of it?
We started off with the food court, actually, taking a specific section of the mall and using it almost as a prototyping stage. Taking the original game's food court and then getting it to the level of graphical quality that we wanted to have for the Deluxe Remaster as a whole. So, we had discussions and back and forth about how far we were going to push it and how we wanted to have the visual style look in the Deluxe Remaster. Once the food court had got there, we decided then, okay, now we can branch out and build in the other areas of the mall around it and use that as a sort of stepping stone onto completing the rest of the design. And as the art director, and myself worked on it, the ultimate goal was to make sure it had the same sort of design charm and essence of the original, but maintaining a sense of believability that you need whenever the graphics become more photorealistic, and that was kind of the process that we took.
Was there ever a temptation to sort of take the weapon crafting elements that show up in games like Dead Rising 2, Dead Rising 3, Dead Rising Off the Record, and try to apply that to the remaster, the Deluxe Remaster, or was it always kind of a thing where you wanted to stay faithful to the original gameplay's main elements of combat and exploration?
We did essentially want to keep to the concept of faithfully recreating the original game experience, so we never really considered lifting a feature like combo weapons wholesale from one of the later games as such. But at the same time, we want to provide some surprises for experienced users who know the original game inside out and have some things they wouldn't expect, or some things that make them smile. So there actually is a system in the game that lets you somewhat take two weapons after you've done your first playthrough, that is, and combine them in a certain kind of maybe more limited way than those features, and for example have access to the psychopath weapons earlier than you normally should be able to during the process of the game. And we're hoping that players will enjoy discovering the process of exactly what blend you have to put in the blender to get those things out, and that's something that is hopefully speaks to that idea of you'll be familiar with it from later games, but it isn't just a complete readaptation of the original game's concept, which is Frank finding what he lies around in a shopping mall and using it to slaughter the zombies.
And speaking of the later games in the Dead Rising series, now that you've gotten the Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster out the door, there's a lot of fans out there that I myself included that would love to see kind of more of this stuff where it's more beautiful, but like faithful to the original. And I wonder, is Capcom considering pursuing more in this style, such as with Dead Rising 2, Dead Rising 3, maybe other games like Dino Crisis, down the line.
The reason we took the Deluxe Remaster, as we branded it, approach for Dead Rising 1 was that we felt that the game, I think as you mentioned earlier, it really holds up well enough that you don't need to do the full remake of this game to make it acceptable or comfortable to play for modern players. It just takes some brushing up and dusting off and improvement to still be a fully acceptable game experience all these years later. So if we were to make any further Deluxe Remasters in future, it would have to be a game where we feel the same, where it's a game that by and large it can pass today in terms of its entertainment value and playability, and you would just need to sort of tweak it and tune it to be suitable for modern players. Whether or not we'll actually do that, we've just released the game, I think it's a week ago, about now. So we're going to wait and see how it performs sales-wise, and take more of a measure of fan response, and then we'll see where we go in the future.